Once upon a time, there was a man named David Carter, a wealthy entrepreneur who found himself at a crossroads in life. Despite his financial success, he felt broken and overwhelmed after the tragic loss of his wife Rachel 2 years ago. As a devoted father, he struggled to find a caregiver for his son Noah, who was diagnosed with nonverbal autism. David had already gone through 6 nannies in just 10 months, each one leaving after a brief stint, unable to connect with Noah or handle his special needs. One day, as David sat in the dining room, a woman named Lisa Adams walked in. At 46 years old, she wore a tattered gray sweatshirt, faded joggers, and scuffed sneakers. Nothing about her suggested that she was a professional nanny. There was no clipboard or impressive references, just a simple resume printed from a library computer and a warm, reassuring smile. David glanced at her resume, pretending to read it, but his mind wandered. He couldn't shake off the unease that came from her unassuming appearance. "I've worked with children with special needs for over 20 years, Lisa said softly, her hands resting calmly in her lap. Mostly kids the system tends to overlook. David raised an eyebrow. Intrigued yet skeptical. "What kind of special needs?" he probed. "Cerebral palsy, nonverbal autism, traumatic brain injuries. Some have no families, some are stuck in group homes. It's never easy," she replied, her voice steady and poised. David felt a flicker of uncertainty. He was accustomed to hiring based on credentials and impressive accolades, yet something about Lisa made him pause. "Do you know who you're being considered for?" he asked, eyeing her closely. She nodded, her gaze unwavering. "Noah, your son." David leaned back in his chair, watching her carefully. "He's 7, nonverbal, needs a walker, doesn't trust people, and sometimes he bites." Lisa chuckled softly. "Biting doesn't scare me. A boy who bites is just trying to say something no one else is hearing." David was momentarily taken aback, not because her words were profound, but because they rang true. Noah had been trying to communicate, and yet David had been too preoccupied with his startup in Silicon Valley to truly listen. "You don't seem like you're here for the money," he muttered, still wary. "I'm not," she replied simply. "So why are you here?" David asked. Lisa glanced down the hallway, where the soft squeak of Noah's walker echoed. Without flinching, she said, "Because I remember what it's like to feel invisible, and I don't want him to feel that way." In that moment, David felt a lump in his throat, unsure of how to respond. He looked down at the table, then back at her, finally saying, "You start Monday." Yet, he was still uncertain about the impact Lisa would have on his home and on Noah's life. As you reflect on this story, consider the importance of looking beyond appearances and recognizing the potential in those who may not fit the conventional mold. Sometimes, the help we need comes from the most unexpected places. As Monday dawned, Lisa Adams arrived at David's home with a sense of calm that contrasted sharply with the chaotic atmosphere of the Carter household. David was already in a frenzy, juggling work emails and trying to coax his son Noah to eat breakfast. The tension in the air was palpable, and every moment felt like a race against time. When Lisa knocked softly on the door, David didn't have to look to know it was her. He felt a strange mix of anticipation and anxiety. "Good morning, Noah," Lisa greeted as she stepped inside, her voice gentle and inviting. Noah, sitting at the table with his back turned, didn't respond. He was used to strangers coming and going, and trust was a concept that seemed foreign to him. Unfazed, Lisa crouched down to Noah's level, her demeanor relaxed and non-threatening. "I like your socks," she said, noticing the bright green ones peeking out from under his sweatpants. "They remind me of sour apple candy," David observed from the kitchen, feeling an unsettling mix of irritation and admiration. How could she be so calm in the face of Noah's indifference? "He won't talk," David interjected, trying to set expectations. "He might growl if he's in the mood." Lisa smiled, still focused on Noah. "I'm not expecting him to," she replied, her tone unwavering. "He doesn't owe me anything." David felt a twinge of annoyance. Her casual confidence made him question his own authority in his home. "I'll be working from the study," he said curtly, grabbing his coffee. "There's a list on the fridge, therapy times, feeding schedule, meds. Just stick to it." Lisa nodded, and David retreated to the study, closing the door behind him. Though he was supposed to be working, his curiosity got the better of him. He cracked the door open just a bit, and what he saw left him momentarily speechless. Lisa sat cross-legged on the living room floor, a small xylophone balanced on her lap. She tapped out a slow rhythm, pausing between notes, while Noah stood a few feet away, watching intently but not moving. The peacefulness of the scene was striking. "That's a C note," Lisa said softly, tapping it again. "You can hit it if you want. You don't have to. I'm just playing." Noah's eyes flicked to the instrument, and for the first time, David noticed a spark of interest in his son. A warmth spread through David's chest, as he realized that Lisa was breaking through the silence that had enveloped their home for so long. The rest of the day passed without incident. No outbursts, no chaos, just a quiet harmony that David had almost forgotten existed. As we consider the interactions between Lisa and Noah, let us remember the importance of patience and understanding in building relationships, especially with those who may initially seem unreachable. Sometimes it's the small gestures that create the biggest impact. As the days passed, David couldn't shake the unease he felt about Lisa's unconventional methods. While she seemed to be making progress with Noah, he often found himself questioning her approach. On one hand, he was grateful for the calm she brought into their chaotic lives. On the other, he worried that her lack of formal structure might not be what Noah needed. David had always relied on credentials and accolades, and Lisa was a stark contrast to the professionals he was used to hiring. By the end of the first week, Lisa had established herself as a steady presence in the household. She didn't disrupt David's routines or impose her methods. Instead, she simply existed in their space, offering Noah a sense of comfort. Yet, despite her efforts, Noah remained distant. He tolerated her presence but had yet to fully engage. He would allow her to brush his hair and sit beside her during meals, but he never reached for her hand or smiled. One afternoon, Lisa introduced a new activity, a colorful wooden puzzle she had picked up from a thrift store. As she sat cross-legged on the floor, she held up a chunky giraffe piece and gently coaxed Noah. "Want to try the giraffe?" she asked, her voice soft and encouraging. Noah stared blankly at the puzzle, showing no interest. David, watching from the doorway, felt a surge of frustration. "He hates puzzles," he said flatly, crossing his arms. He threw a block at the last therapist who tried to use one. Lisa didn't flinch. "He's never tried this one," she replied calmly, placing the giraffe on the rug beside him. "He won't throw it at me." David stepped closer, irritation bubbling beneath the surface. "You've only been here for a few days. That's not enough time to know what he'll do." Lisa met his gaze with unwavering confidence. "You're right, but it's long enough to let him decide." Just then, Noah picked up the giraffe, but instead of placing it in the puzzle, he slammed it onto the floor repeatedly until it shattered. "Okay," Lisa said softly, not showing any sign of distress. "You didn't like that. That's all right." But Noah wasn't finished. He swept his arm across the puzzle, sending the pieces flying. A guttural noise escaped him, a mix of frustration and anger. David, seeing the chaos unfold, felt his temper rise. "That's enough, Noah," he shouted. But Lisa quickly raised her hand. "Don't yell," she said firmly, her voice steady. "Let me handle this." David froze, his fists clenched, unsure of how to respond to her calm authority. Lisa crouched down beside Noah, who was breathing heavily and glaring at the mess. "I know you didn't like it," she whispered, her tone soothing. "That's okay. You don't have to like puzzles. You don't have to like me. But you can be angry without breaking things, okay? Mad is okay. We just need a different way to show it." Noah turned his head away, but Lisa simply sat next to him, patiently waiting. After several tense minutes, Noah leaned his head against her shoulder. It was a small gesture, but it shook David to his core. This moment serves as a powerful reminder that understanding and compassion can often bridge the gap between frustration and connection. In our own lives, let us strive to create safe spaces for others to express their feelings, even when it's challenging. As the second week unfolded, David began to notice subtle shifts in Noah's behavior. Despite his initial reservations, he could see that Lisa was making an impact. Their interactions were slowly becoming more meaningful, but David still felt a knot of anxiety in his stomach. He wanted to protect Noah, but he couldn't ignore the fact that Lisa was bridging a gap that he had struggled to cross. One Thursday afternoon, Lisa introduced a new activity that would test both her patience and Noah's willingness to engage. She brought out a vibrant wooden puzzle with large animal pieces, each crafted to fit snugly in place. Sitting on the carpet, she held up the giraffe piece and asked, "Would you like to try the giraffe, Noah?" She placed it in front of him, her expression hopeful. Noah stared at the puzzle, his eyes dull with disinterest. David, watching from the doorway, couldn't help but interject. "He hates puzzles," he said, his voice flat. "Last time he threw the blocks at the therapist." "That's because he hasn't tried this one," Lisa replied, still focused on Noah. "He won't throw it at me." David stepped closer, a mix of irritation and disbelief coursing through him. "You've only been here a few days. How can you know what he will do?" Lisa met his gaze calmly. "You're right. But it's long enough to let him decide." Just then, Noah grasped the giraffe piece and, in an unexpected burst of frustration, began slamming it against the floor repeatedly until it splintered. David felt his heart race, panic rising within him. "Okay, Noah, that's enough," he said sharply, taking a step forward, but Lisa held up her hand, her demeanor firm yet composed. "Don't shout," she urged. "Let me try." David hesitated, watching as Lisa crouched beside Noah, who was now sitting stiffly, breathing heavily. "I know you didn't like that," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's okay. You don't have to like puzzles. You don't have to like me. But it's okay to be angry without breaking things. We just need to find a different way to express that anger." Noah turned his head away, but Lisa didn't push him. She remained seated beside him, her presence steady and unwavering. After several long minutes, Noah finally leaned his head against her shoulder. It was a small gesture, yet it struck David deeply, as he witnessed a connection forming that he had been unable to create himself. David stepped back, retreating to the study. He closed the door and sat down, feeling a mix of emotions, relief, confusion, and a flicker of hope. This moment emphasizes the importance of patience and understanding in nurturing relationships. As we navigate our own challenges, let us remember to create environments where emotions can be expressed safely, allowing others to feel heard and valued. By the time the second week rolled around, Lisa had seamlessly integrated herself into the Carter household. Her presence transformed the atmosphere, making the once stark silence feel more like a gentle hum of life. Noah still didn't speak, but there were subtle signs of progress. He began to follow Lisa from room to room, resting his hand on her knee during story time and inching closer during meals. These small gestures indicated a growing bond between them, something that filled David with cautious hope. One sunny morning, Lisa approached David with an idea that made him uneasy. "I'd like to take Noah outside to play in the backyard without the harness," she suggested. "He walks better on grass. It feels softer when he stumbles, and it's less restrictive." David hesitated, concern flickering in his eyes. "What if he falls?" he asked, his protective instincts kicking in. "You'll be responsible if something happens." "I understand," Lisa replied, her tone steady and confident. "But I believe he needs the freedom to explore." After a moment of contemplation, David begrudgingly nodded, allowing her to take Noah outside. He returned to his laptop, but his mind remained elsewhere. Peering through the window, David watched as Lisa spread a blanket on the grass and placed a few soft toys beside her. Noah shuffled toward her, gripping his walker with determination. Then something unexpected happened. Lisa pulled out a notepad and began drawing. "Look at this," she said, holding up a rough sketch of a bird. "Can you help me draw its wing?" David squinted, intrigued as he watched Noah reach out for a stick. Slowly and awkwardly, he pressed it to the paper, creating a crude line. Lisa's face lit up with delight. "You did that! You helped!" Noah didn't smile, but he made a low humming sound, a soft acknowledgement of his achievement. Suddenly, Lisa revealed the Picture Exchange Communication System, PECS board, filled with symbols for various needs and emotions. "What's that?" David muttered under his breath, his heart racing. Noah reached out and tapped the symbol for happy multiple times. David's chest tightened as he stormed outside, his frustration boiling over. "Where did you get that?" he demanded, his voice sharper than intended. "It's a PECS board," Lisa explained calmly. "Noah's previous therapist didn't give him the chance he needed to use it." "Why hasn't anyone else seen this in him?" David asked, bewildered. "Because they weren't really looking," she replied, her gaze steady. In that moment, David realized that Lisa had not only unlocked a new way for Noah to communicate, but also revealed his own failures in understanding his son. This pivotal moment reminds us of the importance of truly observing and listening to those we care for. Let's strive to look deeper and embrace the potential in everyone, especially those who may feel unheard or overlooked. As the days went by, the bond between Lisa and Noah continued to grow, but the emotional weight of David's past remained a heavy burden on his shoulders. He found himself reflecting on the mistakes he had made and the trauma that had affected his son. One evening, after Lisa had finished bathing Noah, she wheeled him gently into his bedroom, humming a soft lullaby. The room was calm, and Noah seemed peaceful, wrapped snugly in his towel. David sat at the kitchen table, his laptop open but untouched. When Lisa joined him, she noticed the tension in his posture. "He's asleep," she said, a smile on her face. "He asked for calm a few times. I think he just likes the word." David chuckled softly, but his laughter quickly faded. "I think he likes you," he replied, his voice tinged with sincerity. Lisa's smile widened, but then she grew serious. "Can I ask you something, David?" "Sure," he said, closing his laptop, intrigued. "That binder in the office with Noah's therapy notes, why does it stop in February?" she inquired, her gaze steady. David stiffened, a rush of defensiveness flooding through him. "That's none of your business," he said, his tone sharper than he intended. Lisa didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned in closer, her expression gentle yet firm. "You hired me to care for Noah. If something happened that changed his behavior, I need to know." He paused, the air thick with unspoken words. "I said drop it," he insisted, but Lisa wouldn't back down. David, something happened, didn't it? Finally, he relented. My old therapist, Eric Mason, he murmured almost to himself. Lisa's eyes widened. The one who filled out all those notes? She pressed gently. David nodded slowly. He came highly recommended. He was good at first. Noah was making progress. But one day, Noah stopped wanting to see him. He screamed at the sight of him. What happened? Lisa asked, her voice dropping. I don't know, David confessed. I came home early one day and found Eric yelling at him, not loudly but cruelly, mocking him, telling him he'd never talk and would always be broken. Lisa's expression hardened. I fired him on the spot, David continued, his voice trembling. I tried to report it, but he disappeared, shut down his practice. Did you tell Noah's new therapists? Lisa asked softly. I didn't want them to think he was ruined, David replied, guilt washing over him. Sometimes trauma doesn't scream, Lisa said quietly. Sometimes it just sits there, waiting for someone to ask the right questions. David felt the weight of her words. He had tried to protect Noah but had ended up burying the truth. This moment in the story highlights the necessity of confronting our past and acknowledging our mistakes. Let us strive to be open and honest, not just with ourselves but with those we care about, as this is often the first step toward healing. It was a rainy Wednesday, and the sound of raindrops tapping against the windows felt like an echo of David's own anxiety. Noah had always been frightened of storms, and today was no exception. He refused to leave his bed, trembling at the sound of thunder. David stood outside his son's room, holding a cup of coffee, feeling utterly helpless. In contrast, Lisa sat beside Noah, gently stroking his back and whispering calming words to him. He's not eating, David said softly, his heart heavy with concern. He's scared, Lisa replied, her voice soothing. He thinks something bad is coming. David took a deep breath, realizing how true that was. He's not wrong, he murmured, stepping into the room. David sat at the foot of Noah's bed, finally putting aside his laptop and phone. It felt like a long time since he had truly engaged with his son. I wasn't supposed to be a single dad, he admitted, his voice cracking. I loved Rachel, but I never thought I'd have to raise Noah alone. Noah shifted slightly at the mention of his mother, and David pressed on, feeling a mix of sorrow and nostalgia. Rachel died so quickly, stage 4 ovarian cancer. One moment we were planning for the future, and the next I was left with a grieving child who couldn't tell me what he needed. Lisa listened intently, her eyes softening as David shared his pain. I had to keep it together for my business, for everything. I told myself I'd grieve later, he continued, the weight of regret palpable in his words. Did you ever get to grieve? Lisa asked quietly, her gaze steady. No, David replied bitterly. Once Noah stopped talking, I didn't know what to do with a child who was grieving silently. He didn't stop talking, Lisa corrected gently. He just started using silence. Her words struck David like a lightning bolt. He ran a hand through his hair, leaning forward as he processed what she said. At night, I'd hear him making these small noises, not words, just sounds. It was like he was calling for someone who wasn't there. Lisa nodded slowly. He was calling for her. David felt a lump in his throat. Noah used to sleep on her chest. I'd find them together every morning, her arms around him, his fingers tangled in her hair. A heavy silence enveloped the room. Then Lisa spoke softly. You know, when I was 9, my mother went to prison. I never saw her again. I bounced through different homes, but one woman, Mrs. Deborah, gave me a drawer in her kitchen just for my things. It was small, but it made me feel like I belonged. David looked at her, realizing the depth of her understanding. You came back to kids like him because you know what it's like to feel invisible, he said, understanding dawning on him. Lisa smiled gently. Exactly. I see the same pain in Noah. He's not broken. He just needs someone to show him he's not alone. This exchange highlights the power of vulnerability and the importance of sharing our stories. By opening up about our struggles, we can foster connections that lead to healing, not just for ourselves, but for others who may be feeling lost or alone. The following days felt different for David and Noah, as the storm clouds of grief began to part, allowing sunlight to seep into their lives. David found himself more present, engaging with Noah in ways he hadn't done in a long time. The house, once filled with the echoes of silence, now carried the sounds of laughter and light-hearted conversations. It was a gradual transformation that both thrilled and terrified David. One evening, David returned home from a last-minute investor dinner, feeling the weight of unease in his gut. He had left Lisa and Noah in capable hands, but something felt off. As he stepped inside, the familiar warmth of the house enveloped him, but it was the sound that caught him off guard. Laughter. Not just Lisa's, but Noah's. It was a sound he hadn't heard in ages, a small, joyful noise that made his heart swell. Moving cautiously toward the den, David peeked inside, not wanting to disrupt the moment. There was Lisa, sitting cross-legged on the floor, with Noah sprawled out on a large foam mat. They were playing a game, and the sight filled David with an overwhelming sense of relief. Noah was sitting without his walker, his arms moving animatedly as he attempted to mimic Lisa's expressions. "Okay, Noah, show me proud," Lisa encouraged, holding up a mirror to reflect Noah's actions. With a grunt, Noah tapped his chest twice and then smiled, his face lighting up with pride. "That's right," Lisa beamed at him. "You should be proud." David felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes as he watched this exchange. Then Lisa held up another card. "Now what about tired?" Noah yawned dramatically, slumping forward and giggling into his palms. That laugh pierced through David's heart like a bolt of lightning, invigorating his spirit. Unable to contain himself, David stepped into the room, fully expecting the joy to dissipate. But when Noah turned and saw him, he froze for a moment. Then, slowly, Noah lifted his arms, not in a typical request to be picked up, but as an offering, palms facing up, inviting his father to join in the moment. David dropped to his knees, wrapping his arms around Noah, pulling him close. "I missed you," he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. "I've missed so much." Noah leaned into his father's embrace, and in that moment, the connection they had longed for was finally there. Turning to Lisa, David said, "How did you do this?" With a gentle smile, she replied, "He did this. I just listened." David looked down at Noah, brushing his fingers through his hair as a sense of warmth filled him. "I forgot how to do that," he murmured, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over him. "It's not too late," Lisa assured him, her eyes shining with understanding. As the evening unfolded, they shared stories and laughter, filling the house with a joy that had long been absent. This moment serves as a powerful reminder that healing takes time and patience. Let us cherish the small victories in our relationships and recognize that true wealth is found in the connections we nurture, one moment at a time. In our lives, it's never too late to start again and embrace the joy that surrounds us.